Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with Pro Wrestling Logic YouTube channel. We continue our TNT Tuesday Night Titans review series, and we continue it on the February 15th edition of TNT Tuesday Night Titans, and that is in the year 1985. We're going to run through the whole series, so stay tuned for that. In any event, this is a relatively noteworthy edition of the series for a couple of reasons, which we'll get to in a minute here. But if you're new here, like, subscribe, comment below what series you'd like to see in the future. Next up after TNT's finished, as far as old school's concerned, on top of the current day content we do, is Saturday Night Night's main event. We're going to run through all 34, 35 of those, whatever it is, episode by episode. So that's upcoming probably within the next month or so. But if you want to see something after that or hear something after that, let me know. We'll do our best to get it to you. Anyway, Cyndi Lauper receives an achievement award to open the program here. This is a historic uh, event because we really begin to see, her being a big deal. We begin to see her um, uh, being addressed as the link to the Rock and Wrestling Connection, which for pro wrestling is big. I don't know how big it was for rock music at the time to have someone involved with wrestling, but it certainly was big for wrestling to have a rock star involved with it. Um, and then obviously we see various other aspects of that. We see Roddy Piper, who again, and I will say it again and again and again, but he is phenomenal in this role because he's out there addressing, going after Lou Albano and slapping Lou Albano. He's out there addressing his hatred for Cyndi Lauper. I think this is where he sneaks the word masturbation onto TV again, which for 1985 is risque. And I mean, you hear so much from Piper about how to be a heel and make you wonder how much of this guy is real. To modern day heels, it's kind of like, ha ha, boo me, please. But Roddy Piper, no. You really wondered about him. He insults Hulk Hogan, basically says Hogan's been ducking him. Hogan's not a real champion, not a real man. He can't handle him, all this stuff. Obviously, they're what, a month and a half away from WrestleMania 1. But at this point, we don't even really know that WrestleMania 1 is fully a thing yet. That's a couple weeks away still. That's a garden show away. And at this point, WrestleMania 1 make or break for McMahon, but you wouldn't know it by watching these TNT shows. Um, Either that or they're promoting them other places, but I can't seem to believe that. That doesn't make sense to my brain that they would promote it, on other programs, on the syndicated program, maybe on Primetime Wrestling. I don't think Primetime started yet, though. But, and not promoted here. So gut instinct says they're not promoting WrestleMania, and it's, 6 weeks away, which is really interesting to me. Anyway, Piper goes on, insults Hogan, insults Albano, calls him a fraud for his involvement with multiple sclerosis. He goes after Cyndi Lauper, says that he should be taking credit for her and all this other stuff. Really classic Piper here. If you are a Piper fan, going back and watching this, probably a good idea. But I've always been a Piper interview fan. I'm not really that much, or was not that much, a fan of Piper in the ring. Easy for me to say. Uh, just he wasn't my style, but on the microphone, I think he's in the conversation for certainly the best of his era, and probably in the top 5 or 10 all time, or at least in the modern era anyway. Modern era being 85 to now. He's in that conversation at the very least. Anyway, we see a clipped match from 12/28/84, I believe from Madison Square Garden. Piper and Orton versus Snuka and Tonga Kid. Tonga Kid eventually takes the primary spots around the horn of Snuka when Snuka is out of commission. Tonga Kid, who I believe later goes on to be Tama in the Islanders, if I've got my Samoan lineage correct. But basically, at this at this point, he's a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid getting an opportunity. Just really cool, like that's that's awesome to be in the Garden, Boston Garden, Madison Square Garden, and be a young kid like that. It's just really cool, and I love seeing opportunities for people. Obviously, it's something that did not work out for him because he does disappear for a little while in between runs. But just that opportunity and being given that opportunity, and what that's like for a young person, and just once in a lifetime opportunity, and really fun. We then go back to the you know we go back to the ring area, and we hear, or the interview area rather, and we hear Orton hipping Piper to a lot of things. We see a an attack, or the video on the attack of Lou Albano. Albano gets hit with the award that he's to receive. He's reaching out to Hulk Hogan, reaching out to how how bad this is for Rock and Wrestling, how bad this is for Cyndi Lauper and David Wolf, and all these things, and really, I mean, there's the assault there on Lauper. Lauper gets kicked in the head, and Albano gets smashed with an award, and all these things. And I mean, you have security in there who literally are like guns drawn, ready to go. You couldn't get that today. There's a certain level of innocence, but also believability that like human beings would actually believe that something a wrestler could do. Any wrestler at that point. I mean, obviously in the 40s through the 70s, it was much more common, but by the 80s, people started to question. I'm not saying that no one questioned it before then, but the vast majority wanted to believe up until the 80s. But then you'd have a guy like Piper, a guy like Flair, a guy like Ole Anderson who could really blur those lines and still make people wonder for a few more years. And it's always cool to watch that. Then we go into Vince McMahon Hype Machine Central as he spends a segment praising the actions of Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Of course, Snuka, who is months removed from what we later find out is the murder of his girlfriend Nancy Argentino. Obviously he's not even in WrestleMania 1 except as a corner person. Part of me wonders if he wouldn't have gotten maybe a six-man spot. Maybe it's Piper, Orton, and Orndorff versus Snuka, T, and Hogan in a six-man match, had that not been a danger to really push Snuka. Obviously, Snuka is a corner man, but corner man, for as popular as he was in the earlier stages of things, and I will hit pause because that's my phone. But certainly for the rate at which Snuka was moving along at that particular juncture, it's inconceivable that he wouldn't have had a bigger role had the personal issues not been as big as they were. Obviously, he's standing on the outside of the ring, he gets payday, but I think if he legally hadn't been as tied up, and with how predominant he had been in '83 through early '85, especially with the Don Morocco cage match in 1983, October that year, and the whole Morocco feud really, which incidentally inspired Mick Foley to become a wrestler, and imagine, a world where Mick Foley didn't become a wrestler. But anyway, the influence that Snuka had a few years before would indicate that he should have been a more prominent role in WrestleMania 1, but promoting him as anything more than the last minute corner man might have been too dangerous, perhaps, or maybe they didn't figure him in that deeply. I don't know, but it always felt off to me that he didn't have a more prominent role on what at the time was the biggest event, certainly of the last several years, perhaps ever in company history. Anyway, Snuka goes on to have a match with Bobby Bass. Obviously, a one-sided encounter, as Snuka is here to get over and just do what he normally does. Chops and dives, and obviously the top rope splash to finish things off. Nondescript match, not worth going out of your way to see. But Snuka then is very underspoken, for lack of a better term. Says he doesn't like to do a lot of talking. has a very non-sequential promo, but I don't know, and I'd love for someone to comment about this. Have you ever heard Jimmy Snuka cut a promo that wasn't jumbled and missing words and just difficult? I don't know that I ever have. So, for those that were fans in the 70s, his Mid Atlantic work or other places, did Jimmy Snuka ever cut a really uh, logical interview? I haven't seen one. I'd like to see one if they exist. So I'd be interested in that. We closed the program with David Wolf, obviously the manager of Cyndi Lauper. He was talking about getting assaulted. He's talking about dealing with Piper. He's talking about the Rock and Wrestling connection and the potential losses therein. He's talking about a lot of things, asking Hulk Hogan to step up, and Hogan Piper is coming, and all those things, and really just he plays the role very, very well in the sense that here's a guy who's 125, 150 pounds, and he's a non wrestler, and he got beat up by wrestlers, and he's intimidated by that fact. That's a good thing. I wish there were more people who kind of played the intimidation role a bit better in modern wrestling, especially non wrestlers and the like. But anyway, that'll close this particular program for this particular week in February of 1985 on TNT. We will have many more of these upcoming. We are running through the entire series episodically, so worth checking that out. And if you have a series you want to see us cover, comment below. But until then, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Until next time, everybody.